Hello everyone and welcome. The Snowman here, and the draw is officially out for the 2019 US Open. I'll have preview videos here for both the men and the women. In this video though, right now, I want to look at the men's singles draw, and it is a pretty fun looking one. No Juan Martín Del Potro and no Andy Murray. Those are the only two major big names out of it. But certainly a lot of good storylines, so I want to look at all four sections of this draw and see what we got in Flushing Meadows. So as we pull up the first quarter of the draw here, it's a somewhat cumbersome draw for the number one player in the world, Novak Djokovic. Joker has played very few tournaments this year, but Novak's still the reigning champ at the Aussie Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open. So at this point, it's very clear to me that his main focus is the Grand Slams. He got the career Golden Masters 1000 Slam last year when he won in Cincinnati. I think he's putting all of his might into the majors now. He's at 16, Rafa's at 18, Federer is at 20, and I think he wants to overtake Fed really, really badly in terms of career Grand Slams. That's why we saw him laser focused at Wimbledon, winning that epic 5-setter against Fed in the final. I think he's going to be locked in again right here. But he's not going to want to see who is the other big seed in this section, because it is the young Russian who's been hot. That is number 5, Daniil Medvedev, who's at a career high thanks to a just glorious August tennis for Medvedev. Back-to-back-to-back finals in the month of August. The City Open in DC. Also made the final at the Rogers Cup in Montreal, and he won his first ever Masters 1000 title, Medvedev did, in Cincinnati. So 14-2 overall in August, the most wins on the tour this year with 44, and he did beat Novak Djokovic in Cincinnati just last week, came back from a set behind. That would be a dazzling quarterfinal matchup if that comes to fruition. He's got a great game that's going to keep him around for a long time, does Medvedev. 6'6", but he moves tremendously well, hits the ball extremely flat and is steady off of both wings, starting to beef up his serve as well. So they're definitely the two favorites here. Djoko will have a few potential obstacles, though, before that matchup with Medvedev. Could be Sam Querrey in the second round. We know Querrey's pulled off some pretty big upsets at Grand Slams before. Just beat Dominic Thiem last month at the first round of Wimbledon. Also beat Joker 3 years ago in the Wimbledon third round, which was the shocker of all shocks. So Querrey will be a big server potentially in the second round for Djokovic. Round of 16 then could be against the 23 seed here, Stan Wawrinka, the 2016 US Open champ. Could also be against Kevin Anderson, another big server there, the 2017 US Open finalist, who has had a lot of injury problems, but we know of his power game. And the two other names I want to mention out of Section 1 that could make a run, a couple of other young guys, Hubert Hurkacz, the Pole, and Miomir Kecmanovic, both had just great Augusts in terms of upset wins. Hurkacz taking out Tsitsipas in Canada, and then Kecmanovic in Cincy ran through both Felix Auger-Aliassime and Zverev. So these are two young guys with great defensive games. Hurkacz especially can defend almost Andy Murray-esque. And their tremendous hardcourt games are only going to get better for those two young guys. Moving to Section 2 now, and maybe the biggest question of this men's draw before it came out was going to be, where does the 3 seed, the third best player in the world right now, Roger Federer, fall in all this? We know he would be either on Novak's half or on Rafa's half, and it turns out he is on the side as Djokovic. So Fed the top seed here, the number 3 seed. And he's got to be still licking his chops from that heartbreaking defeat that I mentioned to Joker in the Wimbledon final, a 5-hour classic. If I'm not over it yet, though, as a Fed fan, I doubt Fed is completely over it yet. He was the one who actually went through it. So hopefully he can find his groove again. Looked a little bit dispirited in Cincinnati, losing to Andrei Rublev pretty early on. But it's a relative cakewalk draw for the Swissman. Plays a qualifier in round 1. Damir Džumhur potentially in the second round. Luca Pouille, who he's beat recently in the third round. And David Goffin, who he beat in the Halle final a couple of months ago. None of those names scare me. Those 16 guys in this mini section, I think Federer cruises to the quarterfinals, unlike he did last year. But then the quarterfinals could be a bit tougher. We see guys like number 12, Borna Coric here, who's beaten Fed at that tournament in Halle, played him tough also last year on the hard courts at Indian Wells. I see number 21, Milos Raonic, who has also beaten Federer in a Grand Slam at Wimbledon. We know if he's healthy, he can make a run with his big serve and big forehand. And then the 7th seed, Kei Nishikori, who the US Open has been his best major. Last 4 tournaments in Flushing Meadows for Nishikori. 2 semifinals and a finals appearance. Did run out of gas a bit against Novak last year in the semis, but he's got a pretty easy draw to the round of 16. So a lot of good things happening here. Also, if you enjoy big serving, a great first round matchup here between Raonic and the Chilean Nicolas Jarry. I'll set the over/under for tiebreakers in that match at 2.5. Overall, though, I don't see a lot of dangerous floaters here. Maybe Alex de Minaur, the young Aussie, can make a run, but Fed should get to the semifinals in my estimation. Now in Section 3, things begin to open up perhaps a bit here. We have the number 8 seed at the top, Stefanos Tsitsipas, who comes into New York on a 3-game losing skid. Hasn't played too well since the French Open, that epic 5-set match against Stan Wawrinka. And I am putting the Greek on upset alert in New York because he's got a first-round matchup against the aforementioned Andrei Rublev, who in the last few weeks has made a final in Hamburg, also made a quarterfinal run in Cincinnati, and in those 2 tournaments, he beat Dominic Thiem on clay in Hamburg, and then he also just beat Roger Federer last week in Cincinnati. Really overpowered Fed, just blew him off the court, took the racket out of his hands. So Rublev, the Russian, has dealt with some injuries, but when he's firing, he can be lethal. And something else that Tsitsipas isn't going to want to see is that Nick Kyrgios also in this mini section. It could be Tsitsipas-Kyrgios in the 3rd round. And Nick just beat Tsitsipas in DC at the City Open, one of the more entertaining matches of the year. That was a 3rd set tiebreak where Kyrgios saved a match point. Maybe you heard Kyrgios then was also fined over $100,000 in last week's tournament in Cincy. He busted a couple of rackets, also said plenty of unfiltered comments to the chair umpire, Fergus Murphy. I think called him a giant tool, among many other things. So I can't wait to see where Nick's head is at heading into the U.S. Open. But probably the best men's first-round matchup of this whole tournament is going to be in this Section 3, and that is the 2 young Canadians, Denis Shapovalov against Felix Auger-Aliassime. It is a rematch from a first-round U.S. Open match last year, where the 2 Canadians were a set apiece before young Felix had to retire with an injury. At that point, it's funny how things change in 12 months. Critics, I was much higher on Shapovalov back then, but now coming into this year's matchup, everybody's a lot higher on Auger-Aliassime, and it seems like he is likely going to get the first Grand Slam win before Shapovalov. I mean, he looks like a complete player. I'm pumped for this match, though. Must-see TV. I hope they put it on Arthur Ashe or Louis Armstrong at night, either Monday or Tuesday night. It's going to be great. Expect supreme shot making. I am anticipating 4 or 5 sets of breathtaking tennis. Give me Dennis, though, slightly in an instant classic. And then speaking of classics, we do also have the 4-seed Dominic Thiem here. And of course, you may remember his epic against Nadal last year at the US Open. 5-set tiebreaker was the decider there. And he's the favorite in this section, but I think it's safe to say this is the most open quarter of the draw for sure. Then in Section 4, we've got the number 2 player in the world, Rafael Nadal, and maybe I don't applaud Nadal as much as I should, being a Fed fan, but he's quietly overtaken Novak Djokovic now in the 2019 Race to London standing, so he's actually been the best player of 2019. If the season ended today, he would be the number 1 player, not Djokovic. He just defended his title at the Rogers Cup in Montreal, beat Medvedev in the final, and then he took off Cincinnati so he could rest some more. But the biggest thing for Rafa right now is that he is healthy. Normally, Rafa seems a bit more battered and bruised by this time of the calendar, but he looks fresh, and that is pretty scary for opponents. First round match for Nadal against John Millman. Millman, the man who upset Fed at the 2018 US Open round of 16 last year. Remember those sweltering conditions. Millman, a physical beast, trains in the hot sun down under. But he could give Rafa a stern test. I don't anticipate lightning to strike twice, though, for Millman. Then we also have the 6th seed, the German Alexander Zverev. This has been his worst major, though, the US Open. Just 4-4 in his career. Never been past the 3rd round in New York for Zverev. And I actually think that the 9th seed here, Karen Khachanov, the big hitting Russian, is the favorite to make the quarters over Zverev because, Khachanov has started to get his groove back the last few months of the season. And like Dominic Thiem, Khachanov had an incredible effort against Nadal at the 2018 US Open. So in my opinion, that would be a more fun quarterfinal matchup. Khachanov v. Nadal, be a lot of long rallies, bludgeoning balls back and forth. But we'll see if Zverev can finally overcome the Grand Slam curse for him. 2 other players then who can make this section interesting could meet Rafa in the round of 16. We've got the 2014 US Open champ Marin Cilic And we also have John Isner. So lots of big servers over here. Some heavy artillery with Joe Willie Tsonga, John Leonard Struff, and Dr. Ivo Karlovic. Get ready for some grown man tennis coming out of this corner. Overall, though, Rafa should love this draw. He's going to enjoy the fact that Djokovic and Federer are both duking it out in the top half of this section. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, let me know who you think is going to do well at the US Open. Please check out my women's draw preview as well, but thank you so much. Can't wait for it, and cheers.